Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Cruising your way on this episode of Off 90. Energy, creativity, and a strong sense of community. These are just some of the qualities of this Renaissance woman from Rochester. Trout fishing is a very important activity to the community of Preston. Find out why it's so vital. Meet a writer from Rochester who turned her experiences into a published work of fiction. And for her, this is only the beginning. It's all just ahead, Off 90. Hi, I'm Barbara Keith. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Off 90. It can safely be said that Rochester's Jane Balogh has many talents. She can be seen regularly playing piano for the public at the Mayo Clinic. Jane is a painter, and her work can be found worldwide. She hosts a long-running interview program called the Balogh Report. Yes, Jane does a lot of things, and she does them with a style all her own.
I'm interested in a lot of things. I interview, I play the piano, I write poetry, I paint. I'm Jane Balogh. I grew up in a small town. And at that particular time in history, there was art and music and poetry everywhere. It was a very diverse culture that encouraged all of these activities. So you sort of grew up with it. Well, I was the Poet Laureate for the Rochester Veterans Memorial for many years. And I did poems and music for presentation at their programs. Mayor Ardell Brady asked me to be Rochester's first Poet Laureate. And he presented it at the council, and the council all voted to say, that's a wonderful idea. My job is to get people to read poetry, to write poetry, and to appreciate poetry. But I started drawing when I was quite young. But I guess I did my first painting for an exhibit in maybe 1974, 75. And it's grown from there. My goal with my paintings is to make spaces and people happy, and to brighten their lives and brighten the spaces and brighten the people. And you'll notice in my paintings I always use a little bit of gold leaf or silver leaf, and it really brightens up the colors. This painting, it's acrylic with gold leaf, is one of three called the Painted Desert Triptych. And when it's all done, it's like 9 feet by 4 feet in size. It's finished, but I can only show one piece at a time here. The administrator of the Samaritan Bethany Homes has invited artists to help make the environment at the homes like home. You know, wall art, pictures of flowers, pictures of trees, pictures of people. I was able to do specific pieces for specific places that would provide warmth and hominess. When I was thinking about this welcoming environment at the Samaritan Bethany homes, I could think of a tree for shelter, a tree for looking at it and remembering its branches come down and just envelop you. And this is a gold leaf tree. It took a long time to do. I did one on pets, a great big one, a 4-by-6-foot painting of pets. And I used photographs of some of the pets the people had there. And then I put in a giraffe and an elephant and a pig. And that turned out quite well. Or I did a neighborhood, you know, a street scene. So I could use this to make the environment more friendly and make people happier. Welcome to this week's edition of the Balogh Report. I'm Jane Balogh. The television show was born in 1974. It was a year and a half after the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, declared that there should be local origination along with this privilege of carrying all these carriers through a cable. And I'd just come back from the President's Committee on Employment of Handicapped People, and several local people who'd been there said, "How about doing a television program for us?" I said, "Sure. We'll tape it and see how it goes." And that was the first one. And right after that aired, I was deluged with requests for programs. Now we talk about a bit of history. This program has a birthday this week. And God willing, next year we'll celebrate 40 years. So
what a lot of people don't know is that is the longest running public access program in cable in the United States.
Jane now has kind of established a pattern where she plays on Mondays and Thursdays from 10 till noon. And she's done that now for over 10 years. I think we found that the music softens the day, adds some diversity to the day, and certainly with Jane Balogh offers a connection to music that can really help patients. Sometimes patients get great news and want to celebrate. Sometimes patients get not so good news and they need someone to be able to share that with.
They'd just gotten this big, beautiful Bosendorfer grand piano from a benefactor. And I was really curious about how it sounded, and so while I was waiting for the doctor, I sat down and started playing some songs I knew, and all of a sudden there's a gathering of people around, and they're coming up and saying, "Do you know this one, or do you know that one?" And it was so much fun. I thought, you know what? I'm going to come back and do this, because as I retired, I was trying to think of something useful to volunteer. Well, as it turned out, I'm busier than I was when I was working.
I'm Bob Hank, and this is my wife, Harriet. We're from White Bear Lake, Minnesota, and we're patients at the Mayo Clinic. We adjust our schedules so that we're here on Monday and Thursday so we can listen to her. There are times when I even shed tears when I hear some of these songs they sing.
Hopefully it helps them forget why they're there. You know, if you play songs that they heard many years ago and you play that song, and maybe for a minute or so they can forget the procedure that they're apprehensive about. Just takes them back to a happier time. A large part of talent is a gift. And there are a lot of gifted people in the world, but I was fortunate enough to be able to use those gifts. You say, what motivates me to perform? Stewardship of those gifts. Is I really believe that, as it says, him to whom much has been given, of him much is expected.
The city of Preston used to be mainly an area bolstered by agriculture, but it has become well known to anglers as a great place to catch trout. The National Trout Center is located in Preston. Its goal is to conserve the natural and cultural heritage of trout and their cold water environments by engaging the public through education, practice, and awareness.
So this is a spring in its truest sense, where there's so much pressure underground that it's bubbling out of the ground. This water is actually drinkable. It's really a unique phenomenon that we have here in southeastern Minnesota, and really throughout the driftless region. There's a lot of occurrences that are similar to this. This is a cave in Forestville State Park in Fillmore County, Minnesota, where the subterranean flow becomes terrestrial and turns into a creek. It's a point source for Canfield Creek, which is a feeder creek into the Root River system. And the water coming out of this cave is 48 degrees, it's clean, it's cold, and it's the perfect habitat for trout. I'm Heath Sershin, and I'm the Director of Programs and Operations at the National Trout Center in Preston. When visitors come to the Trout Center, they're typically looking for information regarding angling in the area. They want to know where the fishing is good, and beyond that, how they can catch fish better. This time of year, we find largely that people want to know what creeks are clear, because we've had a lot of high water this year and a lot of brown creeks. There's a few in the area that, regardless of how much precipitation that we have in the area or how much snow has melted, they're still going to run crystal clear, and that's an opportunity that a lot of anglers seek. We're increasingly expanding our education reach. So we want to educate more people and educate them in angling arts and angling opportunities and fishing in general. We're also working on a bonding bill that hopefully would lead towards a new facility on the Root River where we can better serve the people who want to learn about angling. The concept of the building is that we would have a living stream on the inside of the building, so we would have a representation of the waterways that we have in the driftless area. The proposed site of the new Trout Center building is right on the river. We would be reclaiming a dilapidated industrial site in town, and there's a beautiful crag across the river. There's a spring that bubbles out of that bluff as well.
I'm Sarah Wongan, President of the Preston Area Chamber of Commerce. Today is Trout Days. It is Preston's festival that we put on every year. The purpose is to bring the community together and have visitors come to the area for something fun to do every summer. This area used to be more agricultural based, but now with the Trout Center it's becoming more tourist based, and now it really gives something to do for the visitors who come to the area.
So we have 3 species of trout in the driftless area. We've got the brown trout, which is a European species of fish, the rainbow trout, which is largely a Western North America species of fish, and the brook trout, which is actually a char species, which is the native species of fish. What makes trout fishing fun? You're out somewhere where you're not likely to run into another person. They're very adaptive fish. They're very smart, but you can actually catch trout quite readily on many different methods. A lot of people will fly fish, and fly fishing is a method where it's different than other methods in that you're casting your lure, your fly, with the weight of the line. So you're casting the line, and your lure is usually something that represents the natural forage base that the fish are eating.
Here we have a southeastern Minnesota brown trout that favors this cold, clean water. And this fish is about 11 inches long, right around there.
You know, the DNR understands the value of having areas that are accessible, where the fishing is good, to get people excited about the activity. And it really starts with kids. The data shows that if you're not hooked on fishing by the time you're a teenager, you're less likely to go fishing once you reach that point in your life. As of about 5 years ago, when the study was published, the impact of trout anglers in the driftless area was a $1.1 billion industry. There is a lot of expense that anglers will put forward. Average trip costs are around $200 according to the data that we have, and how much they'll spend on equipment. You think about that, you get a return on investment that's quite significant. We know that with the numbers on stream restoration projects, that for every dollar that's spent on stream restoration, there's a $25 annual return on those types of things. If you can stick $1 into something and get $25 back from it every year, you're talking about a significant amount of income that is coming back with those types of projects.
Usually, I don't even take the fish out of the water because it's a lower impact, and especially related to catch and release angling. Just leave them in their house as much as possible. Take a look at them, say hi, let them back to their day.
Jody Brown has lived, written, and waited tables in many places in the U.S. After she called Rochester home, Jody used her experiences as source material for her book, Upside Down Kingdom. So, be careful the next time you go out for dinner. You never know if you might make a guest appearance in someone else's book.
The thing I've always wanted to do is write. Why not just write? As scary as that sounds, as scary as it sounds to maybe find out you can't do it or you're terrible at it, that was the thing to do. Just plunge in and try it and go for it, and I haven't looked back. I love it. I'm Jody Brown, and I'm a writer. I wrote a book called Upside Down Kingdom. Upside Down Kingdom is a work of fiction, but it's very, very closely based on my life when I was living in Washington, D.C. I lived there for about 5 years, and the book takes place in 2, so these are a lot of experiences and a lot of happenings condensed down to a 2-year period, and I clobbered them all onto the main character, Amy, so she has to deal with a lot in a small amount of time. I was actually writing a series of emails back home to a good friend of mine and describing to her the life that I was leading and working during the day and waiting tables in the evening, and especially waiting tables in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., and just the crazy happenings that would go on there. And I was imparting to her how I felt and what was going on and trying to give her a real sense of the place and the time and the amazing things that were happening. And from that, the book was born. It's called Upside Down Kingdom. It took me about 9 months to really sort of turn those little emails into a book. And then it took a long time to sit on it and re-edit and let it sit in the closet for a while and stew. But yeah, I eventually got a book out of some emails. Upside Down Kingdom, I think, is my love letter to DuPont Circle, to the neighborhood, to all the amazing goings-on that are happening there on a daily basis. We would, in our little coffee shop, we would have a purse snatcher running in one door and somebody jumping into the other side of the restaurant into the doorway saying, "I just got hit by a car outside." And so there's someone waiting for medical attention, somebody else dealing with the purse snatcher. There were men in business suits riding through on rollerblades trying to get a cup of coffee. It was a circus. It was a complete circus. And in the middle of this kind of atmosphere, if you can find yourself and you find yourself happy and you can find that you accept yourself, others are accepting of you for your good and bad and all of everything, all the problems, all the good and bad. They can accept you and you find that you can accept them. Good, bad, messy, doesn't matter. You're very accepting, very non-judgmental. It changes the way that you think about the world and the way that you can go about moving from place to place or visiting different places and see things through other people's eyes. It really changed my life and my perspective. So I was very happy to write a book and sort of hope that I could open up others' eyes to the different things that are going on around you and the way that you can love them. But I had a waitress job at a fun restaurant just like that. No waiting period, no major interview process, no references to check ahead of time. Just show up Tuesday and hope not to make a fool of myself. This moment would propel my life in an entirely new direction. I was no longer Amy Ash, boring secretary. I was Amy Ash, secretary and waitress. Mr. Harvey laughed. "No wonder you ended up in D.C. Look around you," he said. "This is fiction." Waiting tables is a really good way to interact with different people, to meet people, to find out a little bit about their story, and even just to wander through the dining room and hear the different conversations that are going on. Sometimes everyone's talking about the same TV show. Sometimes they're all talking about the same sort of events that are happening together, whether they like it or they don't. And you can kind of feel like you're a part of the world, even though sometimes you just sit in your office and write during the day and you don't really feel like you're connecting sometimes with people. Even as a little kid, I thought I would write and I would do something else for a real job that would pay the bills, and then on the side I would write. And I always thought that. There's a variety of ways you can go about getting published, looking for an agent, looking straight to a publisher. But for me, I tried all those sort of traditional routes, and eventually they just wouldn't pan out. I would get very nice letters back, and people really seemed to appreciate the book. They seemed to like it. So you just kept sort of, just when you could see through that door, it would slam in your face again, and it just got very frustrating. And for the longest time, I just thought, if only I could get this book into the hands of anybody, just into the hands of the masses. I think it can stand on its own. I think it's got merit, and I think it's a good book. I just need people to be able to read it. Ultimately, I self-published Upside Down Kingdom, and I now have to be a promoter as well, and a huge learning curve for me. I'm balancing writing and promoting and speaking, and for somebody who's a little quieter and would normally stay at home and just sit in the room and write, this is a big change for me. So, but I'm working on it. I have to now promote and sell, and It's a new skill to learn, but I figure if I can sell you a steak, I should be able to sell you my book. My own personal journey with writing took many, many turns along the way. Different states, different places that I live, different jobs that I've taken on in order to be able to pay the bills, and always kept writing and always kept trying to get published, trying to get my voice heard, trying to get out there. And there were times when paying the bills took precedence over writing, and there were times when I just decided writing is what I want to do, and I'm going to make this pay the bills. So I made that transition, and it's been a wonderful whirlwind ever since. And it's a very exciting time. I'm hoping to pay the bills just with writing, and then everything else I do can be gravy.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Off 90.
Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.